What's up guys, Andrew Clark here, and today I want to talk to you about how to make your lead guitar playing sound more unique. Now, these are just some ways that I have developed my own unique style, and I say unique, obviously there's other players that have done this stuff, which is where I've grabbed it from, I've stolen it, but these are the things that I like to do, and obviously, since I'm showing you how to do all these unique things, we're kind of all going to sound the same. We're not going to be so unique anymore, and that's perfectly okay. These are just ways that I like to add some flavor to my playing. They all might not be for you. You might want to grab one or two. You might want to grab them all. You might have other ways that you sound unique, and that is perfectly okay. So the very first one that we're going to talk about is something called raking. Raking is something that's used in metal a lot, but it's also used in blues and things like that as well. And if you can kind of imagine what raking might be, all we're going to do is we're just going to rake through our strings. Sounds simple enough, right? So what we do doesn't sound that interesting, right? But what you can do is you can add these little rakes in between the little riffs and licks that you play, and it actually sounds pretty cool. So I'm gonna show you what that can sound like. So I added some extra ones in there, but you obviously want to use this a little bit sparingly because it can be very aggressive, but it sounds really cool. Stevie Ray Vaughan used to do a lot of this type of thing, and all I'm doing is I'm just muting the strings and I'm dragging my pick across it aggressively. Not too fast. If you do it too fast, you're obviously going to get something more of like a muted strum. But if we do it slowly, and we do it kind of in the middle, that's the sound that we're going for. And we want to kind of make sure no strings ring through unless you're combining it with a note, so you can kind of go something like that. Obviously that wasn't perfect, but raking through on notes sounds cool too. But that's just one thing that you can do. Again, use it sparingly. So going into the kind of next logical thing that we can talk about, we're gonna use muted strums. Now muted strums are just what they sound like. Just muting the guitar and strumming through. So it's like a really fast rake, right? Very simple. But what you do, again, is you add these in between the licks and riffs that you play, and it all of a sudden adds more percussiveness, is probably the best way to put it. It'll sound a little something like this. And the technique for this is actually really easy. If you know how to strum, you know how to do this. All I'm doing, strumming the strings, muting the strings. That's all you have to do. All right, the next technique is something I like to call pops. And these pops, these are another one that might not be for everybody, but we're gonna have to use our other fingers. And it's a lot like guys who slap the bass. If you've seen that before, what they do is they'll slap and then they kind of pop the strings. We're gonna do the same thing with our fingers. So I'm using a pick at the same time, so that means I'm gonna be hybrid picking to get this sound. But all I'm doing is I'm hooking underneath the string and popping it. It's almost like picking it super, super hard. It sounds like this. So obviously by itself, again, not the most interesting thing ever, but when we add it in with our playing, it can sound pretty cool. The important thing with this technique is just to make sure you actually hook that finger, whichever finger you're going to use, around and underneath the string, and you pluck it up. It almost feels like you're going to break the string, so obviously don't break your string, and make sure your strings are fresh. That's always very important. But you're going to pull it until it's like max tension, and then you let it pop back. Your guitar might fall out of tune a little bit if you're doing this, if your guitar is not super stable or you're not using fresh strings or whatever. So just make sure that you're tuned up properly and your strings are stretched out, and you should have no problem. All right, the next little technique is one I encourage everybody to use, and it's something, I call them slurs. I've heard other people call them slurs. Slurs can also mean something else, but basically what it is we're gonna go up to a note and then back down. A lot of times these notes aren't necessarily in the key diatonically, so it can add a lot of flavor, and it's one of the things that is kind of unique about guitar, right? Because we can dance in between actual notes. It's pretty cool, but a slur will sound something like this. So you can see it's very quick. This isn't an easy technique to nail, but what you're doing is you are playing the one note, jumping up to the next fret up really fast and then really fast back down without picking them. So again, it sounds something like this. And the other kind of half to this is you can actually just play just the slide down and it sounds equally cool. So slurs, these are probably the hardest thing to nail properly because you have to have really tight timing and you gotta be quick. A lot of it actually comes from your arm. It's not really your fingers that are moving. It's kind of happening in your wrist and elbow. So practice this one, go slow, and you should be able to get it, but it's one that you might need to sit down and practice for a little while. So I'll show you a couple examples of what slurs can sound like in a more musical context. The next technique is something I call one-string slides. Now, this is something that makes you kind of sound like a slide guitar player. I am an awful slide guitar player, but some of my favorite players, Derek Trucks, Sonny Landreth, those types of guys, they play slide perfectly, and I try to rob some of their stuff, and the way that I do that is with one-string slides. So what that means when I'm playing a scale or something like that, instead of going down or up a string, I go down or up the one string, right? So something like this. The key with one-string slides, obviously you can just play the notes on the one string, but the key is to play a note and then slide up to the next one. So I'm picking one note, sliding up. Picking the next note, sliding up or down. That's the whole idea. So in a musical context, it'll sound something like this. Okay, my last little unique trick for you is a way that I like to thicken up my notes. This is especially cool on single coil guitar, right? Sometimes when you're playing individual notes, it can sound a little bit thin. So what we're gonna do is we're actually going to mute all of our strings close to the note we're playing, and we're gonna play all the strings at once while they're muted and one note is coming through, and it's gonna thicken up that one note. So I'll show you what that looks like. So as you can see, what I'm doing is I'm muting all the strings behind the note that I'm playing. And as I'm strumming all the strings and just letting that one note ring through. This one's gonna take you some time. It's gonna take some practice to get the muting technique down, but if you do have muting down from other things you've learned, this one should come pretty easy. So here it is in a more musical context. So those are just a few ways that you can make your lead guitar playing or your guitar solos or whatever sound a little bit more unique. Obviously now we're all gonna sound the same, but that's perfectly okay. So I'd like to know which one of these you like the most, and I'd also like to know if I left any out, what do you like to do to make your lead guitar playing sound more unique? Please leave those in the comments below. Make sure you subscribe to this channel. Make sure you give this video a thumbs up if you liked it. Honestly, give it a thumbs down. If you didn't like it, that's perfectly fine. Turn on the notification bell so you know when we release a new video, and I will see you guys next time. It almost sounded like I was going. Lord of the Rings.
That's what it was, yeah.
I did that all by ear, by the way.